Kamran Bokhari joining us now. He's a founding director at the Center for Global Policy, a think tank working on issues at the intersection of U.S. foreign policy and the geopolitics of Muslim-majority countries. We've got a lot to cover here. Let's start with these attacks on this militia in both Iraq and Syria. You tweeted earlier today that this is a message sent to Tehran by the Trump administration.
Yes, I mean, how long does anybody think that the United States is just going to sit back and allow the Iranians to continue to do provocations? Remember the attacks on the tankers in the Gulf. Remember the downing of the U.S. UAV. Then the flagrant attack on the Saudi oil facility that disrupted its oil supplies. The United States did not retaliate. I think it's come to a point where the Iranians need to be reminded that they cannot enhance their bargaining position through this way. And if a U.S. person is killed in such an action, no government in Washington is just going to sit down and say, okay, you know what, we'll look the other way.
You can tell I follow you on Twitter, because then I noticed you had a little exchange with a journalist in the area who suggested that this is going to be an escalation in things. And of course, we're hearing these calls for retaliation. The Iraqi government itself with some rather strong words. Where do you see this playing out? I mean, what's going to happen next?
Look, the Iranians have a choice to make. They can come to the negotiating table, or they can continue to play this game. The more this game plays further, the more there's a risk of that escalation. Right now, the United States did not escalate. In fact, the United States, I would argue, was restrained. I mean, the proxy was targeted, not the patron, which we all know is Iran. And so the U.S. is still giving the Iranians an opportunity to come to the table, as far as I see it.
The Iraqi prime minister might take exception to what you said. He said he strongly objected. He says it's a violation of Iraqi sovereignty and a dangerous escalation. What's the relationship like with the U.S. and Iraq as a result of this?
Well, the Iraqis, this is what happens when this is hardwired into the U.S. invasion in 2003. The United States aligned themselves with pro-Iranian Shiite actors to topple Saddam. Those guys formed the government, or at least dominated the government after Saddam's ouster. So they're stuck. The Iraqi Shiites and those who are participating in this government, whether they're Sunnis or Kurds, are stuck between the United States and Iran. Every time the United States and Iran goes at each other, they're in a difficult spot. Now, the idea of violation of sovereignty, well, doesn't that apply to when, you know, there are pro-Iranian militias that are under the control of Iran attack other actors in the country that are in country at the request of the Iraqi government? Isn't that a violation of sovereignty?
To your point, let's talk a little bit about the JCPOA, which you're saying, you know, Iran's kind of jiggering things to try and have a better bargaining position. The Trump administration wants them at the negotiating table, don't they? So where is that? Where do you see that going? You see Lavrov and Rouhani with these statements today. How does all of that factor into this?
So the Iranians are obviously, you know, through these military moves that we just talked about, this diplomacy that they engage in, going to Moscow, visiting with the Europeans and whatnot, is trying to enhance its bargaining position. But it's saying, hey, you know, we need to have the sanctions lifted. Now, the Iranians are also calculating that whether they should negotiate with the Trump administration, given the possibility of a new White House come November. So they don't know who's going to occupy the White House after the election this year. It is 2020 almost. So they're factoring that into their calculus as well. So I think, as for the Russians, they love these kind of things. They love to make life miserable for the United States. They will exploit everybody. They're not friends of the Iranians. The Iranians know that. The Iranians are exploiting them, and the Russians are exploiting the Iranians.
You're talking about the calculus of an election, though, but that's a long time. I mean, it's still a year off. Is that something Iran wants, to just kind of wait this thing out? Because these sanctions are punishing them.
They are, and that is sort of the debate happening within Iran and within Tehran, within the government. You know, do they come and fold right now? Do they throw in the towel right now and start negotiations? What if they don't need to do that just yet? Can they hold out until November? So this is something the Iranians have to decide, but I can tell you that this is on their minds because their foreign minister not too long ago said the very opposite. Hey, we want to negotiate with the United States because we think that there's a more than 50% chance of President Trump getting reelected. These are his words.
Interesting stuff. Always a delight having you on the broadcast. Thanks so much, and Happy New Year in advance.
Happy New Year to you, too.